I tell you what, this makes me sick. This absolutely does. What they're going to do to these two guys and those junior officers. To cover their story, to protect their secret. They even let another one get out of it today, the surface warfare commander. Not really sure what his name is, but they let another guy go without charging him. They're going to throw 5 guys, maybe 6, aboard both ships that were aboard at the time under the bus on this to protect their secret. We have shown clearly and definitively that the Navy is lying. And now, after having reviewed the supplemental, that was the preliminary report versus the final one, the Navy has reversed itself. Now, this is the final report, and this starts with the summary of findings. And I kind of glossed over this, but I think it's an important point. It talks about these 5 failures. Failure to plan for safety. Okay, that's ahead of time. Failure to adhere to sound navigation. That's ahead of time. Execute basic watchstanding. Ahead of time. Failure to properly use available navigation tools. Something ahead of time. But here's the key. Failure to respond deliberately and effectively when in extremis. That's post-collision. So not only now are they saying in this report that the crew of the Fitzgerald was dilatory and derelict and tired and untrained prior to, they're saying that after the collision, they still didn't know what they were doing. Even though we have heard multiple times the crew being described as heroic and masters of their domain and absolutely the best around. This is the same boat that 2 months prior the Navy said was full of rock stars. Those were the words that they used. And then all of a sudden after this, now they're just a bunch of poor, hapless saps that just don't know how to do the very basic fundamental things on a day-to-day basis. Now I brought up, just to be very, very clear, this is what in extremis means. In extreme circumstances, at the point of death. There were no extreme circumstances prior to the collision. So therefore, when they're saying in extremis, they mean after the collision. Now here is the preliminary report. This is the one that they put out. Now this was put out prior to the issue with the McCain. And I wanted to go to the very top here while I'm talking. I forgot to do it ahead of time, and I'm sorry. But it's very, very important to start here because it shows how they've reversed themselves. Number 1, in reference, I directed additional investigation into the damage control and life-saving efforts of the crew. My review of the additional findings confirmed my original determination that the injuries to the 3 surviving service members, and this includes the captain, who's now being charged, and the deaths of 7 sailors occurred in the line of duty and not due to misconduct. Occurred in the line of duty and not due to misconduct. This was prior to the issue with the McCain. This is what the Navy said. And now they're going to charge the captain with, well, I would have to assume homicide is misconduct of some kind. So clearly they have reversed themselves, and they are now not only taking issue with the performance prior to and leading up to the collision, but after and during the response to the collision. So they're definitely covering something up. Now the reason we are all the way down here at point 39 was to go over a couple of the major inconsistencies. This talks about, and they were actually a little bit more detailed in the preliminary report and accurate than in the final report. And we've said this before, the closer to the time of an incident, the more honesty you're going to get. Okay, the 39, the CO was in his cabin at the time of the collision. Crystal's bow struck it and severely damaged his cabin, trapping him side. The CO called the bridge requesting assistance. He called the bridge. So we have to assume with some type of an electronic device. Okay, and then junior officer, they get him out of there, they kettlebells, slam it open, and they make a harness. And it says here the rescue team tied themselves together with a belt in order to create a makeshift harness as they retrieved the CO who was hanging from the side of the ship. Hanging from the side of the ship, yet called the bridge for help. Okay, now that's important because when we go down here to point 49, it talks about general quarters. Now remember, it'll say down here later, they sounded the collision alarm for 2 seconds in this report. That's how longer they sounded the collision alarm for, and nobody called general quarters. Nobody. Not until 13 minutes later, someone who was asleep and got woken up called general quarters. And it says here, at the time of the collision, the DCA was asleep in her rack, woke up when she felt the ship lurch, and the collision alarm then sounded, and the DCA quickly dressed and proceeded to the central control station. From there, she directed damage control efforts, sounded the general quarters alarm, using the general shipboard, using 1MC. So they still had 1MC functioning at that time, according to them. So they had the ability to not only communicate with the captain and put together a team and go get the captain, but nobody called general quarters for 13 minutes. And we'll show that down here. They actually do have, and in the preliminary report, they actually detail, and the preliminary report is where they were saying that they weren't under the impression that there's any misconduct. But now they're saying there's homicide, negligent homicide. So this is all post-collision here. In the final report, it's all pre-collision. So 132, Fitz sounds collision alarm for 2 seconds. Okay, 143, general quarters set. So that's how long it took the damage control officer to be woken up, get dressed, and get to central control, and then call general quarters. That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. None of the command crew thought to call general quarters. Does anyone here remember? And if you don't, you can go back to the video that we did talking about the collision with the USS Porter and the MV Ottawa. They collided, and within seconds, we heard aboard the bridge, someone call general quarters. But they're saying it took 13 minutes and someone who was asleep to do it? Come on. Seriously? All right, 135, commanding officer reported trapped in a stateroom. This is one thing they did poorly in this report, is they have things jumping all over the place. So 130, the collision happens. 132, the collision alarm happens. 135, 3 minutes later, commanding officer reported trapped in a stateroom. But it's 143, 143 general quarters is sounded. By 150, they have the commander back to the bridge. Okay, and here they say 0200. Fitz makes initial report of collision at sea to CDS-15 via personal cell phone at approximately 2:20. And here's where things get really screwy. You go down here to, it's like, okay, so if that happened at 2:20, let's see what happened in between that time. Japanese Coast Guard en route to Fitz location at 2:18. Now, wait a minute. Even the other ship said that they didn't make the call to the Japanese Coast Guard until 0220. Well, I shouldn't say that. 0225. Because the Japanese Coast Guard said that's when they got the call, so they revised the time of the accident to 220, given that the crew of the Crystal said it had just happened, even though it had happened 50 minutes prior. And we also have the issue with the guy below decks, Xavier Martin, and the phone call at 2:56 to his dad using the WhatsApp. So, is he lying? Is the father of that sailor lying about that? Because according to the Navy and their report now, that couldn't possibly be. The young man would have already perished, given the amount of time that it took for the Berthing 2 to flood. It was a matter of minutes. And when we look at the movements of this ship, it makes no sense, because we've established, remember that the big fake false story was that the ship was on autopilot. Well, when we look at this, we noticed this right-hand turn and this other right-hand turn. If this was autopilot, you wouldn't have seen a turn to attempt to avoid. It wasn't autopilot. The commander even said, the commander of that boat, the ACX Crystal, said he was on the bridge and saw the Fitzgerald and flashed his lights and blew the horn and attempted to raise them. Even though in the final report, the Navy says the Crystal didn't do that. Why would the captain of the Crystal lie unless something nefarious was going on? He wouldn't lie because the man's been a captain for 20 years. He would know that if this were truly an accident, he was the one in the right and the Navy ship was the one in the wrong. He wouldn't have any reason to lie. So if he's telling the truth and the Navy's lying, or he's lying and he's got something to cover up, either way, what the Navy is saying happened didn't happen. And we've got 17 sailors aboard the Fitzgerald and the McCain that are not going to get the truth. Their families are not going to get the truth. And we have 2 other sailors that went overboard on 2 other ships in very mysterious circumstances that nobody's even bothering to investigate. And now they're going to try to put 5 guys in jail for it. That's why the channel even brought this up. That's the only reason we're talking about it. That now we're automatically going to, because of, current political climate, we're going to give the government a pass. Because the people that have quintessentially been responsible for holding the government accountable for these types of things are in blind adoration mode and don't want to believe this could happen in the current climate. But it did happen. So many inconsistencies, so many lies, shown over and over and over again. And now they're going to take it to the next level. After letting all the guys way up the chain get out of it, let them retire, let them take their benefits and walk away. I just don't even know what more to say about it. We've documented it to the point of exhaustion and shown more lies and more inconsistencies in this than there has been in a lot of other issues. 10 missile launches during this time, 3 over an ally, 2 that could have reached the United States, 1 thermonuclear detonation, and nothing done about this. 2 critically damaged warships, 19 dead sailors. I don't know what to say, guys. I appreciate those of you who've supported me and those who have stayed with the channel. As of recently, we have gotten a giant influx of attacks from, well, you don't like me using the term because it offends your sensibilities, but people who support the current administration, let's just put it that way. So, it is what it's going to be. Apparently, truth now no longer means anything. Accountability no longer means anything. And I hate to sound negative about it, but the fact that these officers are going to have their lives ruined to protect a secret so that somebody doesn't get embarrassed is one of the greatest travesties, military travesties I've seen in my lifetime. So, anyway, God bless all of you. Please pray for the families of these sailors. Keep them in your thoughts. Keep them in your prayers. They're the real victims here. They're the ones who are going to suffer for this. Like, share, subscribe. We'll see you next time.